All right, gang, I'm back. I'm back for part two. I'm going to share now with you my experience with Andy Garcia and Kurt Russell. I looked over the video and I just want to make sure I didn't leave out anything. And just to, first of all, I apologize for the sniffing. I got like a little cold going on or something. I swim a lot, so sometimes with in my nasal in the water, sometimes I just have the sniffles. But just to fill in a couple of things so you understand. If you have any questions, you can always ask them and I'll answer them. But I guess you're wondering how I got Ray Liotta's address. This particular time with him, back in the late 70s, early 80s, my father would being a committeeman and having a lot of political friends. I used to work at the City Hall Annex, the voter registration, 6 months at a time. So I knew that if you're a registered voter, you can go anytime you want. And I know back then, I don't know about now, there might be some stalking laws put into place to stop guys like me stalking movie stars, if you want to call it stalking. But back then, I knew that you can go to the City Hall Annex and pull out a binder, a certain ward division, and if somebody was registered, there's their public information, their address, whatever. So I did that in this case. I went to wherever I had to go. I forget where it was. It wasn't a city hall, but it was somewhere where public records were, and I found Ray Liotta's address. That's how I found his address. And that's how I found him. The way I found Andy Garcia's address was, I have a friend here I'm still close with today also. Remained friends with him. He was our next door neighbor where I lived in Hollywood, and he was a prop master on films. And one day I'm with we're having lunch, and they're between, they work on movies. My one friend was a prop master, another guy was a grip, and they were talking about locations where they did a movie, a commercial, and one mentioned, where Kurt Russell lived in Pacific Palisades, and another one mentioned where Andy Garcia lived in Toluca Lake. So here it is, and this is 1994. And again, I had no literary agent. And that's a whole nother story because I wind up getting a literary agent. But I find out where Andy Garcia's live. And I'll never forget this. It was a Friday afternoon. It was late in the afternoon. And I decide I'm going to go to his house. And he lived in a beautiful, beautiful an estate, probably a mansion. And I pull up to the gate. And again, well, not like Ray. Ray had a normal, regular home you could walk up to. I ring the buzzer, and there's the camera and the intercom and everything. And I'm here with no permission. And what I'm about to tell him was an outright lie. So I ring the buzzer, and instantly, when he says, "Hello, who is it?" I recognize his voice. And I have so many stories. I mean, being with celebrities and movie stars, I have never, ever have addressed them as Mr. or Mrs. If it was Andy, how you doing, Andy? If it was Ray, how you doing, Ray? I could tell you a great story about me. Happened to be in the company of Frank Sinatra and Barbara Marx, way of being with Guy Marx, the famous and legendary comedian out of South Philly, who took me to dinner one time, and in Frank Sinatra's presence and Barbara Marx, that's the only time I said Mr. and Mrs. So, but the buzzer rings, and it's his voice, and he says, "Who is it?" I go, "Andy." I said, "My name's Al," and like I said, what I'm about to tell him is a lie. And I go, "I just came back from Katie Faye's production down. Tony Danza told me to bring the screenplay to you, something you might be interested in." Now I'm lying, but how's he supposed to know? So he goes, "All right, Al." He says, "Listen, I'm actually packing. I'm going out of town." This is all through the intercom. And he says, "I got my limousine driver coming." He says, "Can you bring it to my agent's office on Monday?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I can bring it there." He goes, "All right, you got a pen and paper?" And I run to the car, get a pen and paper, and he gives me the address. And I thank him, and he says, okay. I tell him, have a great trip, wherever you're going, thank you. And Monday morning, bright early, I bring it to the agent's office. I'll never forget these names. They're etched in my mind for life. The name of the agent was Clifford Stevens. And I go there, and it's early morning. I mean, I'm there first thing. And I go into the office, and an assistant comes out to address me, young kid, and let's just call him, I forget what his name was, but let's just say his name is John. We'll call him John. And I introduce myself to him, and I tell him that I was at Andy Garcia's house on Monday, and he told me to bring the screenplay to Clifford Stevens, his agent. So here it is. So he's like, okay, he takes it, no problem. I leave. You got to, just to fast forward a little bit, this young kid, he was flustered. You could tell he just got there. He had, he was rushing around. I could tell it was bedlam for him. And this means something because I'm going to explain what happens and why it happened in a few minutes. Later that day, I'm out, and at the time I'm living with my aunt, and she's in her 80s, and I would call at the house to check on her, and I call, and she tells me, Albert, somebody called by the name of John, something from Clifford Stevens, and it was all discombobulation. I couldn't understand what she was telling me because she was mentioning to me that they wanted the address to mail something back to me, and I'm like, it just didn't sound right. And being she was up in age, and I don't know, I just go back to the house, and she took a phone number, and it was the Clifford Stevens office. It was the assistant that called. I can't imagine why he's calling me. I call him back, and he gets on the phone. I said, John, this is Al Barbieri. I said, my aunt tells me you called the house. You wanted an address to mail a screenplay back to me? He went, yes, Al. He says, I talked to Clifford Stevens, and he said no one went to his house, and he told nobody to come here and bring a screenplay. I said, John, excuse me. I said, I did not tell you that. I tell him, John, I told you I went to Andy Garcia's house in Toluca Lake. I described the house to him, and Andy told me to bring the screenplay. He said, wait a minute, are you telling me you went to Andy Garcia's house and he told you to bring the screenplay here? I said, that's what I told you, John. He said, can you hold on? Now, he puts me on hold, and I know exactly what's happening. Obviously, he talked to Clifford Stevens because he got the story wrong. Comes back to me 15 minutes later. 15 minutes I'm on hold. He comes back on the phone. He says, Al, I want to apologize. This morning I was such in a rush. I got confused. I called Clifford Stevens. When I talked to Clifford, he said no one came to his home, and we thought this was a scam. And he told me to mail the screenplay back. But we got in touch with Andy. Andy vouched that, yes, you came to the house, and he said to bring the screenplay up to us. And he apologized. I said, no problem. He says, Al, it went out already, now go and mail. He says, so do you want to mail it back to us? I said, no, I'll bring it back to you tomorrow. So I bring it back to him. And the it was, Andy Garcia, who was so nice to have read the screenplay, I posted a letter he wrote me back saying that he really enjoyed the screenplay. He thanked me for giving me the opportunity to read it. He thought that it could be a successful movie. But the fact that his slate was so full, and this is how cool the guy Andy Garcia is, because I've got letters, I've got my screenplay to HBO, I've got it to Castle Rock, I've got it to Wildwood Enterprises, I've got it to so many nice places. They usually send you back a letter, we're not interested, thank you, yeah, and it's the end of it. Andy Garcia wrote a nice letter telling me that he was busy, that he had a project of his own that he wanted to get involved with, and it was called, in the letter he puts The Lost City, and this was 1994, and this movie wound up coming out, I believe, in the late 90s or early 2000s, and it was a movie based in Havana that was close to his heart because he is of Cuban descent, and he directed, wrote it, starred in it, and to me, when I realized when that movie comes out, he's being honest with me, that was a hell of a, it just was a nice way of telling me, he's a sincere guy and that maybe he was interested. But now I'm thinking right now that maybe it's a good idea that I go back to him, because the screenplay that I wrote is a baseball movie, and it's not your typical baseball movie. It uses baseball as a metaphor, and it's based on my experiences through baseball, and I came up with a dynamite story with some characters, through my experiences. And actually the film, the main lead role, which is taken from my life experience as a baseball player pursuing baseball as a young man, actually comes to fruition with the Cannon River Sharks. And I had to rewrite the ending of the main character who was involved with a young kid and mentors this young kid. And what happens is I rewrote the screenplay at the end, because what happened with me with the Cannon River Sharks making my professional debut on a minor league level. So I'm thinking that I'm actually going to go back to Andy Garcia's house and actually get him face to face and bring the letter to him and try to get him to maybe, I don't know, let's take a look at it again. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually, it's what, 20, I don't know, it's 21 years later, and that's what I'm going to do. So one day I'm just going to just do what I have to do. And because I actually did mail him a copy of his letter in 2011, but there's no guarantee. I know that in that letter explained to him about the screenplay 21 years later, back then in 2011, it was 17 years later, that here's a letter you wrote me, you kind of liked the screenplay, and him seeing the letter. But I have no guarantee that he actually got that, because I sent it to his production office. But I got a hunch that I need to go back to his house. I hear he's a dynamite guy. I know he's a dynamite guy. And who knows? This is how you get lucky. So let me end this video, and I'll just tell you on the next video my Kurt Russell experience. It was nothing dramatic, but it was pretty cool. All right.